Marcus wiped down table 7 with the same worn rag he'd been using since his double shift started at 6 that morning. His feet ached, his lower back screamed, but none of that mattered, because in 4 hours he'd be home to tuck in his 7-year-old daughter, Sophie, and that made everything worth it. That was the deal he made with himself every single day since her mother left. Keep moving, keep smiling, keep showing up. For her. The restaurant was the kind of place where money walked in wearing suits that cost more than Marcus made in 3 months. Bellini's Italian Bistro sat on the 42nd floor of a downtown Chicago high-rise, overlooking the city like a king surveying his kingdom. Marcus had worked here for 6 years. He knew every corner, every regular, every whispered business deal that happened over linguine and expensive wine. He was invisible to most of them. That's what waiters are to powerful people, furniture that brings food. But Marcus watched. That's what people forget about the quiet ones. They watch everything. If you believe in kindness and second chances, please like this video, drop a comment, share it with someone who needs to hear this story, and subscribe to the Kindness channel. We're building a community of people who still believe in the good in this world. And tell us in the comments, where are you watching from? We'd love to know. The reservation came in under the name Harrington. Marcus had heard of Richard Harrington. Everyone in Chicago had. 53 years old, self-made billionaire, founder of 3 tech companies, currently in the process of finalizing what the financial papers were calling the deal of the decade, a merger with a European firm that would create 10,000 jobs across the Midwest, 10,000 families, 10,000 futures. The kind of deal that didn't just change a bank account, it changed lives. Harrington arrived at 7:15 with a small entourage, 2 assistants trailing behind him like shadows, a lawyer with silver hair and cold eyes. And beside him, a man introduced simply as Victor, the interpreter. The European partners, a family-owned Swiss firm led by an elderly gentleman named Heinrich Baumann, and his daughter Elise were already seated. They spoke limited English. Victor was there to bridge the gap. Marcus was assigned their table. He introduced himself, took drink orders, smiled at Elise when she politely asked if the pasta was made fresh. She had kind eyes. So did the old man, Heinrich, the sort of deep-set eyes that had seen hard winters and harder losses and come out still believing the world was worth something. Marcus liked them immediately. As the evening progressed, Marcus moved around the table with the practiced ease of someone who had perfected the art of being present without being noticed. He refilled water glasses, brought bread, cleared plates, and listened, the way he always listened, out of habit and boredom and the strange human hunger to understand other people's lives. Victor was translating smoothly, professionally. Harrington was leaning forward, engaged, charming in that way only people born to close deals can be. The Baumanns were nodding and smiling. Everything looked perfect. But Marcus caught something. It was small, a flicker. He spoke no German, no Swiss dialect, nothing close to what was being spoken across that table. But he'd grown up in a diverse neighborhood on the south side of Chicago, and his best friend through high school, a guy named Dmitri, spoke Russian and German fluently. They used to sit on the porch and Dmitri would translate old war movies just for the fun of it. Marcus had picked up enough fragments over 20 years of friendship to recognize certain tones, certain patterns, certain words. And one word Victor used twice in the span of 10 minutes when translating Harrington's enthusiasm about the partnership's future, didn't sit right. The word felt dismissive, flattened. Marcus couldn't be certain, but the old man Heinrich's expression shifted almost imperceptibly both times it was used, a slight tightening around the eyes, a tiny retreat in his posture. Marcus couldn't prove anything. He wasn't a linguist, he was a waiter with sore feet and a daughter waiting at home. But he kept watching Victor. By the time dessert arrived, Marcus had noticed 3 more moments, subtle but consistent, where Victor's translations seemed to soften things the Baumanns said, and where his translations back to them seemed to subtly undercut Harrington's sincerity, not dramatically, not in any way that screamed deception, just enough to introduce quiet distance between 2 parties who were otherwise genuinely connecting. Marcus stood in the kitchen doorway, his heart hammering. What do you do with something like that? What do you do when you're not sure, when you have no proof, when the man at the table could have you fired with a single phone call, when your job is the only thing standing between your daughter and an empty refrigerator? He thought about Sophie. He thought about her drawing he'd found that morning on the kitchen table, a crayon picture of the two of them holding hands under a yellow sun, with the words, "Daddy is my hero," written in her 7-year-old handwriting across the top. Crooked letters, perfect meaning. What kind of hero does nothing when something is wrong? Marcus made his decision. He waited until Victor excused himself to use the restroom. The timing felt like the universe handing him a narrow window, and he knew it would close fast. He approached Harrington directly, leaning down slightly, voice low and steady. "Mr. Harrington, I'm sorry to interrupt. My name is Marcus. I've been your server tonight. I need to say something to you, and I need you to hear me out before you react, because I could lose my job for this, and I need you to know that I know that." Harrington looked up, surprised, suspicious. "Go ahead. I'm not certain about this. I want to be honest with you. I'm not a translator, but I've had a close friend who spoke German for most of my life, and something about the way your interpreter has been handling certain exchanges tonight doesn't feel right to me. Specifically when Mr. Bauman speaks about legacy and trust, and when you speak about your commitment to the workers, I think something is getting lost, or maybe more than lost." Silence. Harrington stared at him. The lawyer beside him looked like he was about to stand up. Harrington held up one hand, stopping him. "You're telling me my translator might be compromised?" "I'm telling you something feels off, sir, and with a deal this size, I thought you deserved to know. That's all I've got. I'll understand if you want to speak to my manager." Marcus straightened up, heart pounding so hard he could feel it in his ears, and walked back toward the kitchen. He expected to be fired before he reached the door. Instead, 5 minutes later, one of Harrington's assistants appeared beside him. "Mr. Harrington would like a word." What followed was something Marcus would spend years trying to explain to people and never quite getting across adequately. Harrington had quietly texted his own personal contact, a woman who worked for his company's international division and was fluent in 3 languages including Swiss German, and asked her to call in and listen through his phone, which he discreetly left on speaker under the table, while Victor returned from the restroom. 10 minutes later, Harrington stood up from the table, excused himself politely, and had Victor escorted from the building by his lawyer. It turned out Victor had been placed there by a competitor, a third party that stood to profit enormously if the Bauman deal fell through. His translations hadn't been outright lies, but they were surgically precise distortions, enough to breed uncertainty, enough to make 2 fundamentally honest people doubt each other's intentions without ever knowing why. The rest of the evening was restructured. A new interpreter was brought in remotely. The dinner stretched past midnight, and somewhere across that table, between an elderly Swiss patriarch and a Chicago billionaire, something real was rebuilt. The deal was signed 2 days later, 10,000 jobs. Marcus found out through the news like everyone else. What he didn't expect was the black car that pulled up outside Bellini's the following Thursday evening, and the assistant who walked in and asked for him by name, and the envelope that was pressed into his hands. Inside was a handwritten note from Richard Harrington. It said, "A man who risks what little he has to protect what's right is worth more than every advisor in my building. Thank you." RH beneath the note was a check. Marcus sat down on the restaurant steps and stared at it for a long time. Long enough for the dinner rush to begin around him. Long enough for the city to hum its familiar indifferent hum. Long enough for his eyes to fill with something he didn't bother blinking away. It was enough to pay off Sophie's medical bills from last winter. Enough to fix the heat in their apartment. Enough to breathe for the first time in what felt like years. He didn't think of himself as a hero that night. He thought about Dmitri on the porch, translating old movies. He thought about Sophie's crayon sun. He thought about how small the moments are that change everything. A flicker across an old man's eyes, a word that didn't sound right, a choice made in a kitchen doorway. He thought about how kindness isn't always grand. Sometimes it's just refusing to look away. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that ordinary people do extraordinary things every single day, please give this video a like, leave a comment below, share it with someone who needs a little hope today, and subscribe to the Kindness channel. We tell stories about real humanity, about courage, compassion, and the people who choose to do right even when it costs them something. You don't want to miss what's coming next. And one more time, drop a comment and tell us where in the world you're watching from. This community spans the globe, and every single one of you matters here.